This kid is the most overrated player in NBA history, sports journalist Marcus Richardson declared on live television, staring directly into the camera with the confidence of someone who had covered basketball for 20 years. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a product of hype, not talent, and I'm going to prove it. What Marcus didn't know was that he was about to embark on a year-long journey that would completely shatter everything he believed about basketball, journalism, and himself. The date was September 12, 2023. Marcus Richardson sat in the ESPN studio in Bristol, Connecticut, delivering what he believed would be his breakthrough moment, a controversial take that would finally establish him as more than just another mid-tier basketball reporter. At 42 years old, Marcus had spent 2 decades covering sports, mostly relegated to covering college games and writing minor NBA features. He'd watched younger, less experienced journalists get promoted to prime assignments while he remained stuck covering summer league games and writing player profiles that few people read. But Marcus had a theory that he believed would change everything. In his mind, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was nothing more than empty statistics on a mediocre team, a player whose individual numbers masked his inability to lead a franchise to genuine success. "Look at the facts," Marcus continued during his television appearance, pulling out a folder filled with carefully selected statistics. "Put up good numbers on bad teams, gets credit for improvements that have more to do with roster construction than individual excellence. When this Thunder team faces real championship pressure, Shai will be exposed as the fraud he's always been." The segment went viral within hours, not because people agreed with Marcus, but because his take was so aggressively contrarian that it sparked fierce debate across social media platforms. Basketball fans, analysts, and even some players responded with incredulity and anger. But Marcus wasn't finished. He had spent months preparing what he called the Shai Project, a comprehensive investigation designed to prove that Gilgeous-Alexander was the most overrated player in professional basketball. "I'm going to follow this team all season," Marcus announced during a follow-up podcast appearance. "I'm going to every Thunder home game. I'm conducting interviews with former teammates, coaches, and anyone who's worked with him. By the end of this season, everyone will understand that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is nothing more than a mirage." Marcus had convinced his editor at Basketball Weekly, a mid-tier sports publication, to fund this year-long investigation. The plan was simple: attend Thunder games, document Shai's failures and clutch moments, interview people who could provide negative insights, and compile evidence that would support his thesis. But what Marcus discovered during his first week in Oklahoma City was something he hadn't expected to encounter: a level of professionalism and community impact that didn't align with his preconceived narrative. His first interview was with Margaret Stevens, a 67-year-old season ticket holder who had supported the Thunder since their arrival from Seattle. Marcus had hoped she would provide complaints about Shai's leadership or express frustration with the team's direction. Instead, Margaret told him something that he found difficult to dismiss. "Young man, I've been watching basketball for 50 years. I've seen superstars who cared more about their statistics than their teammates, and I've seen role players who elevated everyone around them. Shai is something different. He's a superstar who plays like a role player when the team needs it." Marcus tried to steer the conversation toward criticism, asking about times when Shai had disappointed fans or failed to deliver in important moments. Margaret's response was immediate and unwavering. "The only people disappointed in that boy are the ones who don't understand basketball. He's been nothing but a blessing to this city." Frustrated by this lack of supporting evidence, Marcus decided to approach Thunder employees who might provide more critical perspectives. His next interview was with David Torres, a former Thunder assistant coach who had been let go during a roster restructuring. Marcus assumed that Torres, having been dismissed by the organization, would be willing to provide negative insights about the team's star player. "So David, you worked closely with Shai during his development years. What were some of the challenges or areas where he fell short of expectations?" Torres looked at Marcus with genuine confusion. "I'm sorry, are we talking about the same player? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? The guy who was in the gym at 6 a.m. every morning, who never missed a team meeting, who treated everyone from the head coach to the equipment managers with equal respect?" Marcus pressed harder, suggesting that Shai's quiet demeanor might indicate a lack of true leadership qualities. "Let me tell you something," Torres said, his voice becoming more serious. "I've coached players who talked a big game but disappeared when things got difficult. Shai never said much, but he was always the first to take responsibility and the last to take credit. If that's not leadership, then I don't understand basketball." But what happened next would begin to fundamentally challenge everything Marcus thought he knew about journalism and athlete evaluation. During his third week in Oklahoma City, Marcus attended a Thunder practice that was closed to most media. Through his Basketball Weekly credentials, He had secured access to watch the team's preparation for an upcoming game against the Denver Nuggets. What he observed during that practice session was something that no statistic could capture and no highlight reel could demonstrate. Shai's impact on team culture in real time. During a scrimmage drill, rookie Ousmane Dieng made a series of mistakes that clearly frustrated him. Instead of ignoring the young player's struggles or delegating the teaching moment to coaches, Shai immediately called timeout and spent 5 minutes working individually with Dieng on footwork and decision-making. Marcus watched as Shai demonstrated the same drill repeatedly, offering encouragement and technical guidance with the patience of a veteran coach. When Dieng finally executed the play correctly, Shai's enthusiasm was genuine and immediate. "That's exactly right. Do you feel the difference in your balance? That's what we're looking for." What struck Marcus wasn't just the teaching moment itself, but the fact that Shai was spending his own practice time helping a player who wasn't contributing significantly to winning games. This wasn't the behavior of someone focused solely on individual achievement. After practice, Marcus approached Thunder head coach Mark Daigneault for a brief interview. He intended to ask about Shai's limitations or areas needing improvement, but found himself asking a different question entirely. "Coach, I just watched Shai spend considerable practice time working with a rookie. Is that typical behavior for your star players?" Daigneault smiled in a way that suggested this wasn't the first time he'd been asked about Shai's character. "Marcus, I've coached a lot of talented players. Most superstars are focused on their own development, their own statistics, their own legacy. Shai approaches basketball like he's trying to make everyone around him better. That's not something you can teach. That's just who he is." But Marcus wasn't ready to abandon his investigation. He had built his entire professional reputation on this story, and admitting error would mean acknowledging that his judgment about basketball talent was fundamentally flawed. However, what happened during the Thunder's next game would provide Marcus with evidence that directly contradicted his thesis in the most public way possible. The Thunder were facing the Boston Celtics in a nationally televised game that Marcus had specifically targeted as an opportunity to document Shai's struggles against elite competition. He had prepared notes about previous games where Shai had shot poorly or committed crucial turnovers, ready to contextualize any struggles as part of a larger pattern. Instead, he witnessed one of the most complete individual performances he had ever seen in person. Shai scored 38 points, dished out 11 assists, and grabbed 8 rebounds while shooting 15 of 22 from the field. But the statistics didn't capture the most impressive aspect of his performance: his ability to elevate his teammates' play throughout the game. Marcus watched as Shai consistently found open teammates, creating easy scoring opportunities that made role players look like stars. When the Celtics' defense focused on stopping Shai individually, he immediately adjusted to become a facilitator. When they backed off to help on his teammates, he reasserted his scoring dominance. During the fourth quarter, with the game hanging in the balance, Shai made a play that forced Marcus to reconsider everything he thought he understood about basketball leadership. With 2 minutes remaining and the Thunder trailing by 3 points, Shai had a clear path to the basket after stealing a Celtics inbound pass. Instead of taking the easy score that would have cut the deficit to 1, he found teammate Josh Giddey for a wide-open three-pointer that gave the Thunder the lead. The crowd erupted, and Marcus found himself involuntarily standing and applauding, something he had never done as a supposedly objective journalist covering a game. After the game, during the post-game press conference, Marcus asked Shai about that specific play. "You had an easy 2 points but passed for a 3. Can you walk us through that decision-making process?" Shai's response was characteristically thoughtful. "Basketball is about making the best play available. Josh was open, he's a great shooter, and a three-pointer was worth more than my layup. The goal is to win, not to pad individual statistics." Marcus left that press conference with a problem. His year-long investigation was supposed to expose Shai's limitations, but 3 weeks of research had provided only evidence of exceptional character, basketball IQ, and team-first mentality. But what happened during his 4th week in Oklahoma City would completely transform Marcus's understanding of what makes a truly great player. Marcus had arranged to interview Dr. Patricia Williams, a sports psychology professor at the University of Oklahoma who had studied leadership dynamics in professional sports. He hoped she might provide academic support for his theory that quiet players like Shai lacked the necessary personality traits for championship leadership. Instead, Dr. Williams offered insights that challenged the fundamental assumptions underlying Marcus's investigation. "Mr. Richardson, I think you're operating under an outdated model of athletic leadership," she said during their meeting at her campus office. "The idea that great leaders must be vocal, demonstrative, or emotionally expressive is based more on Hollywood stereotypes than psychological research." Dr. Williams pulled out a research study she had conducted on NBA leadership styles over the past decade. "We found that the most effective team leaders often display what we call servant leadership. They prioritize team success over individual recognition. They elevate others through their actions rather than their words, and they maintain emotional consistency regardless of circumstances. She showed Marcus statistical analyses demonstrating that teams led by quiet, consistent players often outperform teams led by more charismatic but emotionally variable superstars. Based on every metric we use to evaluate leadership effectiveness, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander represents an ideal case study of modern athletic leadership. Marcus left that meeting feeling intellectually dishonest about continuing his investigation, but professionally committed to seeing it through. He had publicly declared his intention to expose Shai as overrated, and backing down would damage his credibility as a journalist. However, what happened during his 5th week in Oklahoma City would force him to make a choice between his professional reputation and his personal integrity. Marcus had secured an interview with Robert Martinez, the Thunder's equipment manager, hoping that someone with behind-the-scenes access might provide insights into Shai's character flaws or diva behavior. Instead, Robert told him a story that fundamentally changed Marcus's perspective on what he was trying to accomplish. "You want to know about Shai's character?" Robert said, setting down the basketball shoes he was organizing. "Let me tell you about something that happened last season that never made it into any newspaper." Robert described an incident during a road trip when the team's flight was delayed for 6 hours due to weather. Most players retreated to private areas or focused on their phones and entertainment devices. Shai spent those 6 hours talking with different team employees, trainers, security guards, media relations staff, asking about their families, their career goals, and their experiences working in professional sports. "He wasn't doing it for cameras or publicity," Robert continued. "He genuinely wanted to know about the people who helped make the organization run." By the end of that delay, he knew the names of everyone's children, their birthdays, their anniversaries. Robert pulled out his phone and showed Marcus photos from a team barbecue that Shai had organized at his house for all Thunder employees, not just players and coaches. This young man paid for everything: food, drinks, entertainment for kids, and spent the entire day making sure everyone felt welcome. "Tell me, what overrated superstar does that?" Marcus stared at the photos, seeing Shai playing basketball with equipment managers' children, helping in the kitchen, and engaging in conversations with people who had no influence on his career or public image. For the first time since beginning his investigation, Marcus realized that he might be fundamentally wrong about everything. But the moment that would completely destroy his thesis was still to come. During his 6th week, Marcus attended a Thunder community event where Shai was scheduled to make an appearance at a local children's hospital. Marcus had initially planned to skip this event, but decided to attend hoping to document what he assumed would be a superficial, publicity-driven interaction. What he witnessed instead was the most genuine display of compassion and humility he had ever seen from a professional athlete. Shai spent 4 hours at the hospital, visiting with sick children and their families. There were no cameras present except for a hospital photographer who took pictures for families at their request. No media coverage was planned or executed. Marcus watched as Shai sat with a 9-year-old cancer patient named Tommy, playing video games and talking about basketball for over an hour. When Tommy mentioned that he was scared about an upcoming surgery, Shai's response revealed a depth of character that Marcus hadn't expected. "Tommy, I get scared too sometimes. Before big games, I feel nervous about letting my teammates down. But you know what I've learned? Being brave doesn't mean not feeling scared. It means doing what you need to do even when you are scared." Shai gave Tommy his game-worn shoes and jersey, but more importantly, he gave him his personal phone number and promised to call him before the surgery. "I want you to call me if you get scared, okay? We'll talk through it together." Marcus interviewed Tommy's mother, Sandra, after Shai had left. "This is the 3rd time he's visited Tommy," she said, tears in her eyes. "He calls every week to check on how treatment is going. My son has been wearing that Thunder jersey to every chemotherapy session. This young man doesn't know it, but he's been Tommy's hero through the hardest time of our lives." As Marcus walked to his car that evening, he realized that he had spent 6 weeks trying to tear down someone whose character was infinitely better than his own. But what happened during week 7 would force Marcus to confront the ethical implications of his investigation in the most direct way possible. Marcus received a phone call from his editor at Basketball Weekly, asking for an update on the Shai project. "Marcus, we need to start planning the publication timeline for your investigation. Our readers are expecting the expose you promised. What kind of evidence have you compiled?" For the first time in his career, Marcus found himself unable to answer his editor honestly. The evidence he had compiled completely contradicted his initial thesis, but admitting that would mean acknowledging that his judgment as a basketball analyst was fundamentally flawed. "I'm still gathering information," Marcus replied, buying himself more time to figure out how to handle the situation. That night, Marcus sat in his hotel room, looking through weeks of interview notes, photographs, and observations that painted a picture of excellence, character, and leadership that he had never expected to find. He realized that he faced a choice that would define his integrity as both a journalist and a human being. He could fabricate negative stories to support his original thesis, or he could admit that his investigation had revealed the opposite of what he had intended to prove. But what happened during Week 8 would make that decision for him in the most dramatic way possible. During a Thunder game against the Los Angeles Lakers, Marcus witnessed something that would become the turning point of his entire career. With 3 minutes remaining in a close game, Lakers forward LeBron James was called for a flagrant foul on Thunder rookie Chet Holmgren. The hit was clearly intentional and resulted in Holmgren hitting the floor hard. The arena erupted in anger, and several Thunder players immediately confronted James in what could have escalated into a dangerous situation. Marcus watched as Shai immediately stepped between his teammates and LeBron, not to confront the Lakers star, but to defuse the situation entirely. Hey, everyone calm down," Shai said, addressing both teams. "Chet's okay, the refs made the call. Let's just play basketball." Then Shai did something that Marcus had never seen before in professional sports. He helped LeBron up from where he had fallen during the confrontation and said something that only the cameras caught because of lip-reading technology. "Good foul, vet. Protect your court. But my rookie's tougher than he looks." LeBron smiled and nodded, and what could have been an ugly incident was immediately resolved. After the game, which the Thunder won, Marcus approached LeBron for his thoughts on the incident. "Young fella handled that perfectly," LeBron said. "That's veteran leadership from a guy who's wise beyond his years. He protected his teammate but didn't escalate the situation. That's championship-level maturity." Marcus left that game knowing that his investigation had completely backfired. Instead of finding evidence that Shai was overrated, he had documented a level of character, leadership, and basketball excellence that exceeded even the most positive media coverage. But the story was far from over. Marcus spent the next 2 weeks struggling with how to handle his situation. He had publicly committed to exposing Shai as overrated, but his investigation had proven the exact opposite. During this internal crisis, Marcus received a phone call that would change everything. "Mr. Richardson? This is Tommy's mom, Sandra, from the Children's Hospital. I have something I think you should know." Sandra proceeded to tell Marcus that Shai had called Tommy before his surgery as promised, and had stayed on the phone for 2 hours helping the child stay calm during prep. "But that's not why I'm calling," Sandra continued. "Tommy's surgery went perfectly and he's in recovery now. When he woke up, the first thing he asked for was his phone so he could thank Shai." Sandra's voice became emotional as she continued. "Shai was in the middle of a playoff game. I could hear the crowd noise in the background, but he took the call anyway. He talked to my son for 10 minutes between quarters, telling him how proud he was and how brave Tommy had been." Marcus hung up that phone call knowing that he had to make a choice that would define his character for the rest of his life. The next day, Marcus called his editor at Basketball Weekly and requested a meeting to discuss the direction of his investigation. "John, I need to tell you something about the Shai project," Marcus said, sitting across from his editor in the magazine's conference room. "My investigation didn't reveal what I expected to find." His editor leaned forward, interested. "What do you mean? Did you find something even more damaging than we anticipated?" Marcus took a deep breath before responding. "I found out that I was completely wrong. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander isn't overrated, he's underrated. I spent 2 months trying to tear down someone whose character is better than anyone I've ever covered." The room went silent. Marcus's editor stared at him with the expression of someone whose business plans had just been completely derailed. "Marcus, we've already promoted this story. We have advertising revenue based on the controversy you promised to deliver. You can't just change your thesis because you're having second thoughts." But Marcus had made his decision. "Then I guess I need to find a new job because I'm not going to fabricate stories about a good person just to generate clicks." Marcus walked out of that meeting knowing that his career at Basketball Weekly was over, but feeling more confident about his integrity than he had in years. However, what happened next would prove that sometimes doing the right thing leads to unexpected opportunities. Marcus decided to write the story anyway, not the hit piece he had originally planned, but an honest account of how his investigation had completely changed his perspective on basketball, journalism, and character evaluation. He titled it, "I spent 2 months trying to prove Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was overrated. Here's what I actually found." The article went viral within hours of publication, not because it contained scandal or controversy, but because it represented something rare in modern sports journalism: intellectual honesty and personal growth. Marcus detailed every aspect of his investigation, from his initial biases to the evidence that had changed his mind. He included interviews with community members, teammates, coaches, and hospital staff that painted a picture of character that exceeded even the most positive media coverage. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Marcus received hundreds of messages from readers thanking him for his honesty and integrity. Major sports media outlets reached out offering him positions and interview opportunities, but the most meaningful response came from an unexpected source. 3 days after the article's publication, Marcus received a handwritten note delivered to his hotel in Oklahoma City. "Mr. Richardson, Thank you for taking the time to really understand what we're building here in Oklahoma City. I appreciate your honesty and your willingness to change your mind when presented with new evidence. That takes courage. If you're ever interested in learning more about our organization, you're always welcome here. Shai. Marcus stared at that note for several minutes, realizing that he had received more grace and forgiveness from the person he had tried to attack than he probably deserved. But the story wasn't finished yet. ESPN offered Marcus a position as a senior basketball analyst, specifically because of the integrity he had demonstrated in his Shai investigation. His new role would focus on in-depth player evaluation and character analysis rather than hot takes and controversy generation. During his first appearance on ESPN, Marcus was asked about the lessons he had learned from his investigation. "I learned that great athletes aren't always the loudest or most demonstrative," he said. "Sometimes, the best players are the ones who make everyone around them better without needing credit for it. I also learned that good journalism means being willing to change your mind when the evidence doesn't support your initial thesis." But perhaps the most important outcome of Marcus's investigation was how it changed his approach to sports journalism permanently. From that point forward, Marcus became known for his thorough, character-focused analysis that looked beyond statistics and highlights to evaluate the complete impact of professional athletes. A year later, when Shai led the Thunder to their first NBA championship, Marcus was one of the first journalists to receive credentials for the finals. His coverage of that championship run was widely praised for its depth, accuracy, and insight into the human elements that contribute to team success. During the championship celebration, Marcus had a brief conversation with Shai that would stay with him for the rest of his career. "Mr. Richardson, I want to thank you for how you covered our season. Your articles helped people understand what we were trying to build here." Marcus smiled, thinking about how dramatically his perspective had changed since that first television appearance when he had declared Shai overrated. "Shai, I owe you an apology for my initial approach. I was wrong about everything." Shai's response was characteristically gracious. "You weren't wrong, you just didn't have all the information yet. That's what good journalists do. They keep learning until they get the story right." As Marcus walked away from that conversation, he realized that his failed attempt to destroy Shai's reputation had instead become the most important professional experience of his life. He had learned that great athletes aren't defined by their statistics or their highlight reels, but by their character, their impact on teammates, and their contributions to their communities. Most importantly, he had learned that sometimes the best stories aren't the ones that confirm our preconceived notions, but the ones that challenge us to see the world differently. 2 years later, Marcus published a book titled Beyond the Box Score: What I Learned When I Tried to Tear Down a Champion. It became a bestseller and established him as one of the most respected voices in sports journalism. The book's dedication read simply, "To Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who taught me that greatness is measured not by what you accomplish for yourself, but by what you inspire in others." And in Oklahoma City, where championship banners hung from the rafters and a statue of a young man from Hamilton, Ontario stood outside the arena, they understood that sometimes the best way to recognize greatness is to admit when you were wrong about it in the first place. Marcus Richardson had set out to destroy a career and ended up discovering that some athletes transcend sports entirely, becoming examples of character and leadership that inspire everyone around them to be better than they thought possible. In the end, the Shai Project had succeeded beyond Marcus's wildest expectations, just not in the way he had originally intended.